you have been called the grandfather of early childhood. People have heard you referred to as that. And we were talking as we went in, and I have seen this often, that if you go around this area, everybody knows you because they all studied under you. You go into an early childhood classroom anywhere around here, they studied with David Franks. And so not only do people have a great respect for you, but your influence has been so broad and so widespread now that people are carrying this out everywhere. They're following through on these things that were initiated by you in those years, decades ago. Do you see this as, first of all, how do you respond to that? And do you feel good that Wisconsin is kind of leading this charge and incorporating these things on a very strong and permanent basis then?
There's a lot to do yet, but I feel very good because we have a cadre of people out there, as I mentioned, teachers that have been in the field 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, etc., who are really have acquired a passion for what they're doing, and beyond that, an ability to search for ideas and information and translate research ideas into practice and apply those things in systematic ways. And an understanding, because I think of how we work together, of how to work with people in their community, within their state, etc., to continue to build these things. It's quite remarkable to see what these people have done. I was exposed to a social change model years ago that was used in the state of Iowa to make changes in the field of mental retardation. And then I was exposed to the idea that you not only could do it, but you had a responsibility for trying to secure funds to enrich and support what you're doing. And so I think one of the things that we have done in teacher education through in special ed early childhood is the people who participated in this process of development and are still part of it are applying those same principles. They're working with people in the field. They're working in the field. They're doing things that they wouldn't have done if they hadn't had these experiences. Our students were involved in these things. They were involved in them. They learned to write grants. They learned how to look for good ideas, how to evaluate research. And so this is part, I think, of the process. It's not just how to have a hello time and a goodbye time and how to provide positive reinforcement for a child that does this, or how to set the child on a particular kind of piece of furniture to make it possible for him or her to participate in an activity, or how to get them to sign milk or something like that. It's this passion and these underlying understanding of process and respect for people and how to draw them in and become a part of it, which I think is the contribution that we made. I got caught up in it. I knew that, I was aware I wasn't going to be able to do anything if I had to do it by myself. It was a matter of, if we could do it, if we could get all these people working together. I always said, well, if you get something started, it's not always going to go in exactly the same direction you wanted it to go in, but you got to respect the notion and go with it. But if you get it started, they're going to make it happen, and they have. They have it. If it's just amazing. I was having lunch yesterday with a group of people, so we began to work with mental health issues here in our community about 10 years ago. Worked with people in the community to develop brochures and distribute them, and that evolved into a series of 1 and 2 day conferences where they brought the public in to see films on mental health issues related to children, and now they have a new conference coming up on mental health. But all these things spin off of that, but they use the same processes. So I think that what I'd like to think came from our work was this learning how to work together and literally how to make change. One time you're a leader, one time you're a follower. If you have an idea, how do you expand that network of people to see you get support for it? Who do you have to go to in a community in order to get authority to do these kinds of things? How persistent you have to be, types of things. And I think that's the major contribution. The other things which are hugely important as relates to curriculum and intervention have been spin-offs of that. When we started back in 1973, in 1974, 1975, we were able to bring resources onto a campus at UW-Whitewater where we had early childhood special ed, general early childhood education, and Head Start all in the same facility. And very quickly, we began to integrate those programs. It provided a form of integration / inclusion. It wasn't what I would call full inclusion, but I've never been a believer in full inclusion. I believe in inclusion, meaning that sometimes always children benefit from being with other kids without disabilities, but sometimes they may need assistance in a separate room for a half hour a day or something like that, rather than always being in one environment all the time. So we began to build that, and then we thought, well, we needed multi-dimensional models. So we had center-based model, and then we had a home delivery system, then we had a clinic, and then so we had some kids served in all three of those kinds of things, and some kids only served in one through a home delivery model. We began to work with that, and then we began the notion of, well, how do we get interdisciplinary functioning? How do we go beyond having a speech pathologist working with the kids? What is it that a speech pathologist knows how to do that if it were implemented by the parent and a teacher, 5 hours a day would be more effective than if they're seen by a speech pathologist once or twice a week for 20 minutes? So how do you integrate manual communication into classrooms? How do you integrate in low technology, picture boards and things like that? What can a teacher do that's exactly what the speech and language pathologist would do as it relates to responding to a child and providing them with correction in order to facilitate language development for kids? The same with behavioral practices. What is it that a teacher does that a psychologist would do? Began to integrate all these things. So we brought OT and PT and occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and the teacher into these models of sharing. The idea being that there are many things that they can all do and should do. So sometimes a speech pathologist should in fact know how to use art as a basis for facilitating language development, and also understand behavior modification, when to praise a child or how to provide a prompt for a child and things like that. Same with OTs and PTs. So we began to mix all these kinds of things, and I think from that has grown quite a rich array of people with some very, very strong skills working with young children. And that should permeate and move up. So one of the things that's happening is that there's been a focus on educating the child with a disability in his or her most natural environment. It would be the school which they'd have gone to if in fact they weren't disabled. It would be to be in the classroom with the kids that they would be with if they hadn't had a disability. And so we have a very strong focus now on having early educators, what we call itinerant teaching. They'll go, let's say, and I'll use an example. I'll say the Happy Kangaroo or something like that, private child care center, which has a child with a disability in it. They'll go and work with the teacher in that classroom to provide him or her with the skills to do these things. So all of these things are evolving and will impact, I think, eventually what happens at the upper elementary level, the middle school, and the senior classroom level. And so we've participated in these things. When we first started in teacher education, we had pre-service programs on campus. But one of the most exciting things that I was involved in, we created an idea where we sent a teacher who was fully licensed and trained in to spend 8 to 12 weeks in a classroom with a teacher who hadn't had all the training. Work right in there with her. Quite a remarkable kind of model. And then we did it if in fact the school district where that we were providing that particular kind of service would indicate that they would do it. The building principal, the school psychologist, an OT if he or she was available, a PT, the speech and language pathologists had to agree to participate in about 90 minutes of educational activity once a week. So we not only worked with the teacher in the classroom, we also actually educated the entire team about the importance of early intervention and things like that. So we've been doing all these unusual types of things using educational television network, now the old ETN educational telephone network, and to work across the state. And a lot of that emanated right off of UW Eau Claire's campus. One of the interesting kinds of things that we did was we all of a sudden had, there is a great need to provide more training for the general education teacher about children with disabilities. I don't think this has changed much, but I think it's all they're required to take is a 3-credit course on exception. Remember, it's usually an introduction class, the general ed teacher, and now he or she has 1 or 2 kids with disabilities in their classroom. What I think most people would recognize is not very good preparation for that. So this itinerant teacher plays a huge role in that thing. But what we did is we didn't have the resource on our own campus, and by resource I mean not just the finances, but perhaps support from various elements on campus to build the general ed early childhood program here on campus. So what did we do? We went over and we established a collaborative program with UW River Falls. They brought faculty over here. They taught courses via Education Television Network. We did the same over there. And then we connect with the Wisconsin Indiana Technical College, Western Indiana Technical College to do the same thing, to bring people in to begin training across these dimensions. Now, I've heard that recently Dr. Thorson in the special education department has been able to secure funds through so the student government on campus to invest in the expansion of the program on this campus in order to prepare the early childhood special education teacher also for a role in general ed, so that the early childhood teacher could, in fact, is licensed now to go in and work as a general ed teacher, and brings all of that training in special ed with her when she or him when they go in and work in those environments. So those are new things which are happening, and that's a very positive kind of thing, a contribution that I think will come out of what Dr. Thorison's doing here at UW Eau Claire now.